He pushed through the glass doors of the bank with a presence that filled the room without a word. His suit was tailored, his wristwatch glinted faintly beneath the cuff, and his shoes struck the polished floor with a rhythm that drew attention. Not loud, just certain. But the moment he approached the reception desk, the atmosphere shifted. The woman behind the counter froze mid-sentence. Her practiced smile hesitated, then stiffened into something polite and distant. She glanced toward the manager's office, just a flick of the eyes, but enough to say, something's off. A man waiting with a folder turned around and looked him up and down, slowly, then leaned slightly away as though instinctively repositioning. Behind the glass partition, the branch manager peeked out, saw him and looked back at his screen. No invitation to step forward, no greeting. Security adjusted his stance, subtle, but deliberate. It wasn't chaos, it wasn't loud. It was the stillness that said everything. That whisper of rejection no one needs to say aloud. It's spoken in body language, in tone, in the slight delay before eye contact. He stood there, briefcase in hand, composed, not irritated, not surprised. He asked a simple question. He was here to inquire about a loan. The receptionist blinked, then adjusted herself. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, voice wrapped in forced neutrality. He didn't. What followed was a series of pauses. Long looks, low-toned conversations behind doors not fully closed, and questions he could recite in his sleep. Questions that sounded like protocol on the surface, but always carried the same edge. What kind of business is this for? Do you own the property outright? Is this your first attempt at securing funding? No one asked about the vision. No one wanted to know his experience. No one offered a glass of water, a seat, or a standard brochure about financial services. And as he stood there, silent, still, absorbing every detail, it became clear. They didn't see a potential client. They didn't see a man with decades of success behind him. They didn't see the ownership papers tucked in the briefcase. They saw a black man asking for money. That's what they saw. What they didn't know? They were speaking to their employer. And one of them was about to be escorted out of the building by the end of the hour. Hey, before we go further, if you're already pulled into this moment, do one thing for me. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers around the world. Because what happened next wasn't loud, wasn't messy, but it changed the course of several careers and made one man's silence echo across boardrooms for months to come. Jason Reed didn't grow up with wealth. He grew up with grit. His world wasn't built on second chances or safety nets. It was built on stretch-marked sacrifice and worn-out paychecks. The kind of life where rent was always due 3 days too early and groceries were rationed by dollar signs rather than appetite. Southside Chicago wasn't forgiving. The streets were loud, the nights were long, and the dreams, more often than not, didn't make it past the block. But in that 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a weathered brick building, Evelyn Reed was doing the impossible. A hospital janitor, she scrubbed the scent of tragedy from emergency rooms night after night, then came home to wipe cereal milk off the kitchen counter and comb Jason's hair before sunrise. Her hands were always tired. Her eyes, red-rimmed from sleep deprivation. But she never missed a morning hug or a whispered prayer before he left for school. They didn't talk about dreams in his household. They talked about survival. But Jason dreamt anyway. He was the quiet kid in the back of the class, the one who never raised his hand but always turned in the highest score. He didn't run with the pack, he walked alone, always carrying something, a book, a notepad, sometimes both. Not because someone told him to, but because he needed to understand. His uncle, a barber, noticed, started bringing over old magazines after closing up shop. Black Enterprise, Fortune, Forbes. Jason devoured them like they were novels. He circled stock tickers he didn't understand. He studied headlines about men who looked nothing like him and wondered why. He didn't just read about money, he studied the language of it, the posture, the code, the silence between handshakes and eye contact. By 13, he was mimicking boardroom conversations in the mirror. Not out of vanity, but strategy. He knew the world didn't give him the luxury of arriving unprepared. By 16, he was tutoring neighborhood kids, including some older than him. He didn't charge, but he expected effort. He'd seen too many bright minds dimmed by poverty and low expectations, and he wasn't about to be one of them. When the acceptance letter from Morehouse came, Evelyn cried at the kitchen table. When the scholarship was confirmed, she cried again, but this time she allowed herself to smile. He was the first in their family to leave for college, the first with a shot at something beyond paychecks and past due notices. At Morehouse, Jason thrived, but it wasn't until Harvard Business School that he understood just how many rooms he wasn't expected to enter. He learned quickly. He watched how other students, usually white, always confident, spoke with ease in class, threw out terms like seed round and valuation without hesitation. He saw how professors nodded when certain people spoke, and how others, like him, had to interrupt just to be acknowledged. He stopped trying to fit in and started building his own table. 3 startups. The first failed, the second broke even. The third, it changed everything. A fintech platform that simplified investment strategies for underserved communities, sold to a major player in the market for an 8-figure sum. Jason didn't pop champagne. He reinvested, quietly, discreetly. He wasn't interested in headlines, he was interested in leverage. By 42, he wasn't just successful, he was strategic. He knew how systems operated, knew the unspoken rules. And he knew that in the world of finance, real power wasn't in titles. It was in ownership. So when a boutique private bank in his hometown began struggling, hemorrhaging clients and clinging to outdated practices, Jason saw opportunity, not just to profit, but to test something. He didn't walk into the bank with his name on the wall. He came in through a shell corporation, acquired majority shares through quiet negotiations, used proxies and legal buffers, not because he was hiding, but because he was watching. He wanted to see what would happen when a black man, dressed for business, asking nothing but fair service, walked through the doors of a bank he now owned. Would they treat him with respect? Would they welcome his questions? Or would they do what they've always done to men who looked like him, assume the worst and show it without apology? Jason didn't announce his ownership. He wanted the staff to reveal themselves first. He wanted to see how deep the rot went. What he discovered? It started at the front desk. Jason Reed didn't believe in shouting to be heard. He believed in making silence uncomfortable, and he had grown fluent in reading people who only read others skin deep. The plan wasn't hatched out of vengeance, but curiosity. One that had lived rent-free in the corners of his mind since the first time someone told him, "You don't look like a CEO." For years, he had quietly tested boundaries, walking into luxury car dealerships in hoodies, requesting meetings without using his title, watching how the air in a room shifted when he revealed his credentials. But this was different. This wasn't just about perception. It was about power. Jason had chosen this branch for a reason. 57th and Lincoln, a clean-cut building with white stone walls, brushed steel signage, and large windows that reflected the quiet opulence of its surroundings. The neighborhood was lined with manicured lawns, hybrid SUVs, and coffee shops that sold more conversation than caffeine. People didn't yell here, they didn't rush, but they noticed everything, especially those who didn't blend in. Online, the bank's profile gleamed with curated praise. Professional staff, one review read. Exceptional service, felt like family. Another reviewer wrote, "They truly get to know you here, not just your account." Jason wondered how many of those reviewers looked like him. He arrived at 9:41 a.m. on a Tuesday. He didn't pull up in a luxury vehicle, though he owned several. He drove his late mother's old Nissan, a quiet tribute to the woman who taught him how to keep his shoulders straight even when the world hunched in suspicion. He parked 2 blocks away and walked, alone. His suit was navy blue, tailored to move with him, not announce him. The watch, expensive but understated. The shoes, polished but not flashy. Everything about him was calculated to invite assumptions, just not the right ones. No personal assistant, no scheduled meeting, just a briefcase and a polite demeanor. He stepped inside. The bank lobby was pristine. Marble floors, soft background noise, subtle lighting that made the brass fixtures glow. Behind the counter, a receptionist tapped away at a screen. 2 loan officers chatted by a printer. A security guard, stiff-backed, arms crossed, stood near the door. Jason offered a polite nod and waited. Nothing. 3 minutes passed, then 5. A middle-aged white man in khakis and a windbreaker walked in, nodded at the receptionist, and was greeted instantly. Smiles. Handshake. Walked straight to an office. Jason remained by the front desk, standing calmly. Finally, the receptionist glanced up. Her smile was delayed. A bit stiff. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Jason said, still smiling. "I'm looking for information about a small business loan." She paused, then picked up the phone. A brief, hushed exchange. Jason didn't miss how her eyes flicked to him once during the call. Then she said, "You'll need to speak with our branch manager. He's currently in a meeting." Jason turned his head slowly. Through the glass-paneled wall, he saw the man in question, sitting alone, sipping from a mug. His screen showed a spreadsheet, untouched. Jason gave a polite smile. "I'll wait." It was 10 more minutes before the manager emerged. Late 40s, tanned, wearing a pastel shirt with the sleeves rolled, showing off a flashy gold watch. The kind of man who loved to lead with his handshake but hadn't yet offered one. "You were asking about a loan?" he said. "Yes," Jason replied, extending the folder from his briefcase. "It's a real estate development proposal. I'm redeveloping a block on the west side. Mixed use, affordable housing above, retail spaces below. I've already acquired the permits and property. Just looking to finalize financing for the build-out." The manager flipped through the first few pages with barely a glance. "And you're applying on behalf of?" "Myself." A pause, just long enough to register surprise. "Do you have documentation proving ownership?" Jason gestured toward the papers. "Titles, blueprints, city approvals, zoning board sign-off, it's all there." But the manager wasn't really reading. He was scanning with a different lens, one tinted by assumptions. "Do you have a co-signer?" "No." "Any partners involved?" "No." "This your first project?" Jason smiled. "I've managed 3 in the last 5 years. 2 in Chicago, 1 in Atlanta. All profitable." A blink. Then the manager tried a new angle. "Are you currently employed?" "I run a holding company with 6 subsidiaries and over 400 employees. So yes." The man gave a tight smile. "Well, I see. The thing is, for loans of this size, we usually like to see more structure, more guarantees." Jason leaned forward slightly. "Such as?" "Oh, established lending history with our bank, assets we can verify independently, a solid reputation." Jason cocked his head. "My credit score's over 800, and the assets are outlined on page 6. The manager didn't answer. Then came the sentence. "Well, you understand. We just need to be cautious, especially given your background." Jason let the silence stretch. "My background," he repeated. The manager cleared his throat. We like to know who we're working with." Jason didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't hand over another paper or quote another figure. He closed the folder carefully. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly. "I'll be back shortly." He turned and walked out, the soft sound of his shoes brushing against the marble echoing behind him. Outside, he exhaled. It was exactly what he expected, exactly what he needed. Because now it was no longer a theory. Now it was documented behavior, witnessed, measured, filed away. The man inside that office had looked him in the face, and decided what kind of man he was, based on nothing more than skin. And what he didn't know, Jason Reed owned the pen that signed his paycheck. And the next time he walked through those doors, things wouldn't be so quiet. Jason didn't rush. He never did. Outside the bank, under the canopy of a broad elm whose roots had cracked the pavement over decades of quiet resistance, he stood still, the same cracked sidewalk he'd grown up on. Familiar terrain, no matter the zip code. He inhaled deeply. It wasn't anger that filled his lungs. It was resolve. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number he had memorized but had never needed to use in this way. 3 rings. Then, executive board office. "This is Marlene." "It's Jason," he said, a pause on the other end. Not because she didn't recognize the name, but because she heard the tone. "Are you all right, sir?" Jason didn't answer right away. He turned slowly and looked back at the glass-walled building where he could still see the manager pacing, oblivious. Then he spoke. "I need you to initiate a Code 14. Another pause. Then, without hesitation, "Understood. I'll inform compliance and legal. Full report?" "Yes. I'll brief in person. I'll be there in 30. "Copy. You're not alone, Jason." He ended the call and stood there for a few more seconds, watching traffic pass by. Parents in SUVs, joggers with earbuds, a police cruiser rolling through without a glance in his direction. All of it humming with business as usual. But nothing was usual anymore. Because what happened inside that bank, what had happened to countless others for years, was no longer anecdotal. It was evidence. It was data. It was time. 30 minutes later, the bank lobby didn't look the same. Jason returned, but he did not return alone. A black town car pulled up quietly. From it stepped Jason, flanked by the director of compliance, an HR representative, and 2 executive board members in sharp gray suits with gold lapel pins. They didn't speak as they entered. They didn't have to. The receptionist froze mid-sentence. One of the loan officers stood up slowly, eyes darting between faces. In the far office, the manager, mid-laugh, sipping again from his same mug, saw Jason and paled. He didn't even have time to stand. Jason didn't rush. He walked with the same calm, practiced steps, every gesture deliberate, every second stretching. He approached the counter, placed a sealed envelope on it, turned, faced the manager. "You're terminated," Jason said quietly, "effective immediately." The silence cracked like glass. "What?" The manager's voice rose. Wait a minute. What is this?" "You're done here," Jason said, still calm. "Your badge, your files, and any remaining access revoked. Now." The man stood, confused, angry, laughing nervously. "What is this, a prank? Who the hell do you think you are?" Jason reached into his jacket pocket. From a black leather case, he removed a rectangular ID badge, sleek, subtle, official. He held it up between 2 fingers. "Jason Reed," he said, enunciating each syllable. "Majority shareholder, chairman of this institution." Dead quiet. A beat. Then another. The air seemed to stop moving. The receptionist let out a soft gasp. One of the board members stepped forward and handed a second envelope to the manager, whose hands now trembled. Jason turned, slowly, to the stunned customers who had watched the whole thing unfold like a courtroom drama they hadn't paid admission for. He let them look at him, not as a mystery, but as fact. Then he spoke. "This bank belongs to everyone," Jason said. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And if you work here, if you represent this institution, and you treat people differently based on race or perceived status, then you don't belong here." A man near the waiting area gave a short nod. A woman put her hand over her mouth. The security guard, who had once sized Jason up on arrival, lowered his head. Jason said nothing else. He didn't gloat. He didn't give the manager a second look. He walked out the way he came in. But behind him, everything had changed. Not because a man lost his job, but because a mirror had been held up, and no one could look away. Justice wasn't loud. It was precise. And Jason Reed, he had just delivered it. The video spread like fire laced with gasoline. Jason hadn't needed a press conference, he didn't post about it, didn't tweet a single word. But the universe has a way of documenting truth when the system tries to bury it. A young woman sitting in the bank lobby that morning, college-aged, biracial, daughter of immigrants, had filmed the entire exchange on her phone. She posted it on her account, captioned simply, "When racism met its owner." By the time Jason finished his lunch that day, the video had been shared over 50,000 times. Within 48 hours, it passed 3.2 million views. The algorithms carried it to every corner of the internet. Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn. The footage was dissected on panels, clipped into Instagram Reels, debated on morning shows. People weren't just sharing it, they were studying it. The smirk on the manager's face, the calm in Jason's voice, the badge reveal, the quote that echoed across headlines and hashtags. "This bank belongs to everyone. If you work here and you treat people based on race or status, you don't belong here." Jason became a symbol, not because he asked to be, but because symbols are forged in fire. Still, he didn't issue a statement, didn't go on TV, didn't bask in the noise. He went to work. Behind closed doors, Jason assembled a team. Not PR agents, not spin doctors, architects. Architects of policy, equity, and repair. Within a week, he launched an unprecedented internal investigation into the bank's practices. Every loan application from the past 5 years, tens of thousands of files, was audited by a team of compliance experts, attorneys, and independent watchdog organizations. The data was damning. Approval rates for white applicants were 64% higher than for black applicants with identical credit scores and collateral. Latino business owners were frequently denied loans over insufficient documentation that had never been clearly defined. Female entrepreneurs, especially black women, faced delays, scrutiny, and paperwork burdens not applied to others. This wasn't just one rogue branch manager. It was a culture. So Jason started tearing it down. Policies were rewritten, obsolete procedures tossed out. Mandatory anti-bias training was implemented, not once but quarterly, and not the check-the-box corporate kind, but immersive, community-driven sessions that included direct testimony from those harmed by discriminatory practices. Each employee, from teller to executive, had to recertify under the new equity protocol standards. Jason personally reviewed the bank's vendor and partner relationships, cutting ties with firms that failed inclusion benchmarks. He wasn't interested in apologies. He wanted accountability. But change wasn't just internal. 2 weeks after the manager's termination, the 57th and Lincoln branch reopened. Gone were the outdated brochures and beige walls. In their place, local art, photos of community events, flyers advertising small businesses funded by the Reed Legacy Fund. Every teller wore a badge that read, "We serve everyone." And on the wall behind the front counter, where once hung a faded mission statement, there was now a new plaque etched in clean, bold letters. Integrity, equity, ownership. Jason visited often, not to oversee, but to sit, sometimes in the waiting area talking to elders about their retirement plans, other times behind the counter, shadowing tellers to see how systems were working. More than once, he sat across from a young entrepreneur, reviewing business plans and giving honest, pointed advice. The employees, newly hired under a more inclusive recruitment policy, called him Mr. Reed, but the community just called him Jason. And when people asked why he kept returning to the same branch, even after the dust had settled and the headlines had faded, he always gave the same answer. Because real change doesn't end with exposure, it begins with rebuilding. Jason Reed never set out to become a hero. He wasn't chasing headlines or looking to make someone an example. He wasn't trying to humiliate that branch manager. He wasn't out for blood or applause. He was out for truth, for dignity, for equity, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. Jason knew something many people still struggle to admit. Racism has evolved. It isn't always obvious, loud, or violent. It's quiet now, slippery, corporate, polite. It hides behind policy, behind company standards, behind a manager's smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. It speaks in euphemisms and code. You're not quite what we're looking for. We have to protect our risk profile. Are you sure this is the right place for you? It's the stall, the stare, the subtle sabotage. And Jason? He'd lived it. From South Side sidewalks to Ivy League boardrooms. From classrooms where he was the only black student, to meetings where his ideas were only valid after someone else repeated them in a different tone. He didn't raise his voice, he raised standards. He didn't burn buildings, he built new ones. Jason didn't fire that manager out of ego. He did it because that one man represented 1,000 silent no's, whispered into the ears of people who looked like him, people who were talented, capable, and worthy, but dismissed before they even sat down. The moment Jason slid that shareholder ID across the counter, he wasn't just claiming his power, he was reclaiming ours. That bank was never just a building. It was a mirror, a reflection of how far we still have to go, and how powerful the truth becomes when someone finally stops waiting and takes the pen to write a new chapter. He didn't ask for a seat at the table. He built the table, polished it, strengthened it, opened every chair for those who were always told there wasn't room. And when the old guard looked at him like a problem, he looked back like a solution. Because that's what Jason was. Not an accident, not an exception, not one of the good ones. A blueprint. So the next time someone tells you that calm people can't change the world, that quiet leadership doesn't shake systems, that racism is over because it doesn't look the way it used to, tell them about Jason. Tell them about a boy from the South Side who read Forbes on his porch, who asked too many questions, who circled words he didn't know, and who grew up to make entire institutions circle back and answer for the ones they ignored. Because change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks in wearing a suit, carrying a black briefcase and says, "I'll be back shortly." And when it returns, it brings the storm. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Let us know. Have you ever been told you didn't belong? Have you ever seen someone rise above injustice? We want to hear your story. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers around the world.